chairman, has helped to organize this evening, and we will be pulling questions from our salad bowl. We do not have a moderator. This is how it was done last year, I believe, and we're fine with it. So without further ado, we will begin. Do you want to say something? Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Our fearless leader.
I don't need it. I don't want it. Welcome, everybody. Not walk the candidates. My name is Chris Paul, and I'm one of the co-presidents of the Irvington PTSA, and we, in cooperation with the League of Women Voters of the Rivertowns, are sponsoring this candidate debate tonight. I would like to recognize Kira Smith, who is the chairperson of our Voter Education and Registration Committee. She coordinated all of this tonight, so thank you very much, Kira. I would also like to thank Jody Reber and Lynn Levine for being here, for helping us out with the panel. And of course, introduce the candidates. Beth Cropper. Karen Bernstein. And Michael Hanna. I want to remind all of you that the election is on May 15th, Tuesday, May 15th. The polling place is Main Street School, and it's open from 7 in the morning to 9 at night. Please go and vote. The deadlines for submitting an absentee ballot application, if the ballot is to be mailed to a voter, is tomorrow. The deadline to register to vote is the 10th of May. There's a voter registration drive at Main Street School on that day from 4 to 8 in the evening. On May 14th is the deadline to get an absentee ballot, to submit an absentee ballot application if it is going to be picked up by the by you or whomever, and then election day is the 15th. Again, please go and vote. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to start with a few rules of procedure that we follow for our forums. The order of opening and closing remarks has already been determined by lots that were drawn before the meeting. So we're 1, 2, 3 for opening statements, and the closing statements will be in the reverse order. The order in which candidates will respond to further questions will be rotated by me to assure fairness. A timekeeper or timekeepers will be positioned facing the speakers, and the timekeeper will indicate when 30 seconds remain in the allowed speaking time, and again when the time is up. So you'll have 30 seconds and then stop. Throughout the forum, no comments of a personal or abusive nature will be permitted. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes for an opening statement. At the conclusion of the opening statements, the moderator will ask questions submitted by the community members that are here. The order of response will be opposite to the candidate who made the first opening statement. And for the community questions, each candidate has 1.5 minutes to respond. We do have the option for a 30-second rebuttal if, in fact, people feel that that's necessary. Candidates may use their time to answer the question or to respond to the previous question. At the conclusion of the question period, each candidate will give a 2-minute closing statement, and the order of response will be opposite to the order of the opening statement. Campaign literature, buttons, banners, and etc. are not permitted in this meeting room, and no personal recording of any kind will be permitted during the forum. As well, we do not allow substitute spokespersons for the forum like this. Doesn't seem to be an issue.
Okay.
Yes. But these are the rules that we have. So, welcome, and whenever Lynn is ready.
If I'm ready.
Okay, then we can go ahead and start with the opening statement.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's so great to see you. One of the reasons I love living here in the Irvington School District is that I've had the opportunity to work or get to know so many of you in this room. If we haven't met before, afterwards I'd love to get a chance to say hello and get to meet you. I want to also thank, I see a few fellow board members here, and I appreciate their attendance. We spent a lot of time together, so the fact that they're taking even more time to come to this event is wonderful. But I guess they get a chance to see who they might get to work with soon, and so that's an exciting opportunity. When I was elected in 2015, I was elected with Catherine Palmieri, and so in tribute to her, because she's not running for re-election, I'll start with a little bit about me, and it's a GOP question, which is what she helps get started. So I was born on an island in the Indian Ocean, and its nearest island is called Mauritius, so very far away. My wife is an amazing third grade school teacher in Edgemont. I have 2 girls in high school. We moved here in 2011, at a time of dramatic change with the recession, the introduction of Common Core, the tax cap, and so that led me to get involved, and I worked with the PTSA in advocacy and communications. And in 2015, I felt pretty well prepared, but I have to say that for anyone who's elected, and I think everyone who's served on the board would agree, it's a huge learning curve. We have such high expectations for our school district. And so I hope we get to talk about that journey and all that's involved, but I would say that there's basically sort of 3 guiding rules that I've been working with. And one is that everything we do is a team effort. So I've been working on the board, that's a collaborative effort, and work with the community and the administration. The other is to try and help people to be effective in working with our schools. And the third is no shocks. So we live in a time that's full of incrementalism with the tax cap, and so I don't want to see any large increases or any cuts. We're trying to really focus on just being the best district we can be.
Welcome and thank you to the PTSA and the Women League of Voters and to all the community members who submitted questions today, because without them we wouldn't be able to have this event. I also just want to give a special thanks to my husband and my son, who have been amazingly supportive as our household has been focused on this campaign, more so than I could have ever imagined. A lot of you may not know me, so I've lived in Irvington for 8 years with my husband and my now 8-year-old son. And education, most of you may not know, has actually been a critical component of my fiber. I grew up in a household where the primary focus was on the importance of learning and attending schools that could provide enriching and challenging experiences during my K through 12 school life. I attended a public school, I attended a state university, I graduated from the University of Binghamton with a BS in accounting, and shortly thereafter got my CPA after passing the exam. After leaving public accounting and gaining a lot of experience in different industries, I was lucky I worked with manufacturing industries, nonprofit industries. I started working at a publicly traded educational management organization. It was one of the first to manage public and charter schools across the country. And it was there that I realized my passion for education, and education became my cause. So I think a lot of people don't know how I got involved with all of this, but it's something that I've been working in for quite some time. I was a natural fit. I was the controller of a division that managed about 27 schools all across the country, from New York, and then we dipped our toe in Hawaii at one point, and no, I didn't get to visit. A budget of approximately $200 million that I managed. I was responsible for everything, understanding federal funding, NCLB, union contracts, professional development for teachers, transportation, food service, you name it. If it touched a school, I was involved in it, and I had to understand it. So I think because of all these experiences, I'm a great asset to the board. I can bring fiscal stewardship to the board, really have an analytical mind, and I would run based with diplomacy, professionalism, and integrity, and thanks.
Hello, yes, so good to see everyone. I'd like to thank the League for Women Voters for the Rivertowns and the Irvington PTSA, and a special shout out to Kira for running voter registration and education and events like tonight. I'd like to welcome the members of the community here. I think I actually recognize most of you from so many different areas of my life here over the last 14 years. I have a passion for public education. I think my husband can talk about how boring it is to take car rides for me, and I'm all of a sudden like, did you know what happened in Albany concerning the change in the evaluations and its effect on teachers? He's like, can we talk about the trees? And I try to do that occasionally. But I think the passion for education, it was interesting hearing the other candidates' backgrounds. I grew up in the Bronx. I was the, I continue to be the child of 2 New York City public school teachers, but they're retired at this point. They still live in the Bronx. I went to Bronx Science. I then stayed in New York, went up to Union College, a small liberal arts school in upstate New York. And then I went to law school at BU. And that's where I found my passion for public service. Immediately after leaving law school, I did become a prosecutor. I was a prosecutor in judicial law for 10 years and developed quite a sense of how to investigate and run fact patterns that might require critical thinking. And since then, I've moved into the area of child safety, where I work in Westchester at this time. And I'm currently going to graduate school in public management. And I really hope that I can use my passion for public education and for being updated in issues involving evaluation and the provision of excellence in public education to serve you all.
So, excuse me for 1 minute, but can you hear the candidates? Do you want them to talk?
Can I get them to use the microphone?
Yeah, so if I could just for the process because this is being recorded, so for those
Just
who
pass them around.
I think that one may not be on.
So maybe we'll just
Okay.
pass it down person by person.
It starts with who goes next.
Well, I'll go next because I'm going to ask you a question. Can you hear me without me speaking in the microphone? Do you think I need to speak with it for the question?
It would help if you don't come over
Okay,
here.
yep, I'll come over here. So the first question is, did you hear that?
Well, that's
gonna change this.
That sounds good.
Okay, all right. Sorry, Michelle. The first question is actually a question that has been submitted, and you all had a chance to review this question, I understand. So the opening question is, and we'll start at the end, actually, if you go way back down. If you could go back and change something about your own educational experience, what would you change?
Well, when I read that question this morning,
Here we go.
here we go. Yes, all right. Makes me feel like I should stand up. When I read that question this morning, I thought to myself, well, back in high school when I saw that sign that said debate club meeting tomorrow, maybe I should have attended. But that is something I can't go back and change. But I have found that in my current career, in which I'm working in public management of multidisciplinary investigations of issues relating to child safety, that my quantitative skills weren't exactly where I personally wanted them to be. And that's why I went back to graduate school on a part-time basis, where I'm currently at the Marks School of International Public Affairs, continually updating my understanding of fiscal personnel and policy issues as they relate to public management. My entire career has been based on working in the public interest, and I'm continuing to update those skills. So I feel that instead of looking backwards at that day when I didn't go to debate club, I looked forward to what I could do to improve my education today.
So I thought that was an interesting question as well, and I actually wouldn't change anything. Normally I'm so much better with money. I was really lucky to have a mom who was really in tune with education and making sure that I got the best education possible. And when I was a rising 5th grader, my mother actually took me out of the natural 5th grade school that I'd be going to. I'll just talk loudly. That took me out of the natural 5th grade school that I'd be going to put me into one of the first 3 magnet schools in our district. And this was in the 70s. So I was so lucky because I went to a school that offered a diverse amount of programs. It's where I started language, so we all know now where that comes from. It's where I started computer programming. This is all in 5th grade. It's where I partook in independent reading. And I also got to perform. If any of you can picture me as Brutus and Caesar, that was, I think, my starring role, one of my opening roles. And because of that change that she made, and she took a huge risk on an unknown factor, and I think it really proved to make me a richer person today and helped me find my passions, which include theater and language and computer science.
I love your responses. I think we're breaking the rules right away. We're talking about personal matters, but in the most positive ways. So that's wonderful.
That's okay.
I think many of us, if we had the chance, how many of us have asked the question, if I could go back to high school knowing what I know now? I think that is a response to the confidence that we may have had or lacked when we were in high school. But certainly, we've all learned so much, I'm sure, since that time. I had the opportunity to go to school for 2 years in France. It was an incredible opportunity. It was a real challenge, and I have some friendships I maintain to this day. But I had the opportunity to actually continue there and to graduate, but it would have meant an extra year of school. And I chose to come back and graduate from a high school in Southern California and be done with it and move on to go to college at Cornell College. But I think, that's why I've sometimes second guessed if I had spent that extra time, because what's the rush? I really now believe that it's more important about having a great foundation than to speed along to the next thing. So that's something that I think about, but I wouldn't change. And in fact, I think, as I hear from you, with our careers, we have the opportunity to continually grow in documentary and film. I'm constantly learning, synthesizing, and telling stories, so it's as if I've never left college.
So I just want to show you, the microphone seems to be fading in and out. Does the sound, how is it working? Is it okay?
It's fading in and out. Can you try the other microphone?
Can you try the other microphone?
Okay. All right, go.
You go front.
Yeah.
That should be useful.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's not possible for it to be recorded if we will speak without.
I don't know. Can you? How's this one work? Is this okay?
Yeah.
It seems to be fading.
Close to you.
Yeah, it does seem to fade in and out though, and then it's keep it close. Okay. So I drew a question, and we'll start with Ms. Bernstein. What can or will the board do to objectively measure the effectiveness of the non-mandatory programs and services to ensure our tax dollars are being spent wisely? And I can repeat the question if you need.
Okay. Well, the first thing I think is understanding what all of the non-mandatory programs are. Can you hear me?
Hold it close.
Hold her closer. Okay. First is understanding what all the non-mandatory programs are, understanding how much we're spending on each of those non-mandatory programs, understanding the goals of the non-mandatory programs, because I don't believe we can assess it until we understand what results we're attempting to achieve. So once all of that's factored into play, then we need to understand what grade levels it relates to, and there's a myriad of ways to assess students. I've been doing some research on this. So some kids may thrive in taking bubble tests, some may thrive in producing something that's visual, some may thrive in writing and doing, providing their feedback in different ways. So I think it really depends on the specific program. I can't give a blanket answer. And understanding what the goals of the program are and how much we're spending on each program to get those desired results.
I don't know what to do about it. How's the sound now?
It's going in and out, so you could probably put down the microphone.
Okay, maybe let's put the microphones down. And if we just put them up near the candidates, and then we'll try and capture it. Sorry.
No, I don't think it's you.
I'm just trying to have it in a general sound.
Well, that's an excellent question, and we, I think, are in a wonderful time where we have made that our focus as a board. Essentially, what Erin was describing is very much what we're trying to do, which is what's called program assessment. It's a very mature process at the university level, and we've had an opportunity to look at some documentation and writing related to that. The administration this year is working on starting to develop a program assessment model, which essentially says, when we, no matter what, whether it's mandatory, non-mandatory, in every arena, that what is the intent of the program, how do you implement it with fidelity, and what are the outcomes that you're looking for? Because that really is the question. Program assessment sounds boring, but it's how are we doing? And that's a process by which we can assess, because our school district, by the measures that most other school districts look at, is doing great, but that certainly is not where we want to stop. We have much higher expectations, and so that absolutely is a focus for us going forward. And now.
And building upon what Aaron and Michael were talking about, I've been to many board meetings, and I'd say that over the past 2 years particularly, it's become very clear that there's a focus on, someone's telling me to speak up, a focus on assessment that's been very heartening to everyone who hears about it. Because whether you're looking at mandatory or non-mandatory programs, whatever our children are experiencing, we want to make sure that it's providing them the best possible quality, the best possible learning experience, but at the same time, in stewardship role and a fiduciary responsibility, we make sure that those are a cost, that the cost and the benefits are evening out, and that we have financial effectiveness. I see that this is a board and district leadership team that appears to be doing that on a regular basis. I suppose what I would like to also build into the process is more of a feedback loop in the following way, which is that people, citizens, members of this community do come to school board meetings and make comments, and they also sometimes use the PAC process, which is very helpful for memorializing concerns. I think there needs to be more of a role for the community to speak in an official way about their assessment, including the input that comes from the students who are experiencing programs. And I'd like to see that moving forward.
I don't know if it's quite a rebuttal, but I'd like to respond.
Okay, yeah, we can do 30 second. Everybody have an action for a 30-second rebuttal.
I figure it's an
Are you
opportunity.
ready, Lynn?
So in fact, it's more like I want to piggyback on what you're saying, which is that I share a similar interest and with the board. One avenue that we just are in the process of doing was to implement a district-wide community survey, which involved input from our students, from our staff, and from our community. The results are due to be shared with the public soon, and the goal is also for those results for our administrators to work with them.
Anybody else wants one? No.
Yeah, I did want to say that I thought that seeing that survey, and we've been talking about it a lot in the community, the PTSA helped push out the information, the district did, community members, and it was very important. I think we're all looking forward to seeing the report out next month.
Okay, so we'll move to Mr. Wayne looking first. And I'll draw the questions, you can see me drawing them, so you know that it is actually random. Some of the questions I did go through, and if they have this, if they're the same topic, I've taped them together, so I'll ask both together as opposed to drawing multiple times. So can you hear me okay? Okay. In this era of internet leaks and privacy concerns, what is your understanding of the district's data privacy policy? And if elected to the school board, what, if any, changes would you make? I put this together because I feel like it kind of ties on with that. And so how also do you feel like the board can improve transparency? So data leaks and maybe those don't go perfectly together, and the privacy policy, but maybe not so much. We can just do the privacy policy.
Can we pick?
Yeah, so I'm going to do that leaks and privacy. So maybe my taping wasn't so great.
All right. Well, thank you for asking the question. So it's a constantly evolving process that I think as a board we have to keep asking the question, and we are reassured that there are protocols, that there are laws, that there, any vendor that the district uses is following those laws and those protocols. But we see constantly that there's a new software we may be using, or other processes we may be using, and do those operate in the same manner, and are we protecting student data? It's certainly a very important topic, and one that we have to continue to monitor. Next year is a time to review our technology plan, and certainly that can be part of that process as we renew and revise our technology plan.
That's a great question. I think it's something we probably all think about on a day-to-day basis. I think most of us are probably on Facebook, and it's just something that comes up so often. And it's challenging, right? Because just when you think you get ahead of the curve, there's something new out there, some new company that's doing something that you didn't expect. And I'd like to think, I'm sure the district's responsible in terms of the contracts that it makes with its vendors, and certainly isn't consciously bringing anyone in with the understanding that they're going to breach or violate any terms. You know, I always analogize it to hiring somebody that suddenly commits theft. I never hire somebody I don't trust, right? But things happen, so how do you stay ahead of that? And I think there just has to be constant monitoring, education, and it's a topic that's on everyone's mind. So as long as you're continuing those conversations and continuing to assess, that's, you know, it's probably about as good as you can do. It's so hard though in today's environment where every time you think you have control over something or you've bought some new software, a new vendor in and made it clear what the privacy terms are, things happen. So you'll have to be understanding, and I think you do have to understand that as much as we do, there's always this risk out there that we're just constantly chasing.
Okay, well, my concern about data privacy, I think is maybe a little bit deeper. I mean, in my conversation, but let's first talk about in my readings. In my readings from Controller DiNapoli's updates, which, yes, I'm such a boring policy wonk that I subscribe to the controller of the state's newsletters. I actually found that our district had been the subject of an audit on our data plan and how we use data. And I started reading it, and I'm happy to say, in terms of like a data privacy protocol, that wasn't raised. But I think that it's not as if this is something that we just should be looking at in a piecemeal fashion. In the world of compliance and in the world of public organizations and private organizations, we have very clear rules about data privacy. I do know that in my elementary school experience, not me as a student, as a parent, I was given clearances for everything that my child did and used in terms of data that goes to outside vendors in this community for our school district. But as my child has moved through the grades and is still in middle school, I have personally developed concerns that I am working on with the Legislative Strategic Advisory Committee to look more fully at what is our data privacy protocol. There are definitely best practices and standards for that, and I would absolutely take that as one of my priorities.
I'll try not to abuse this, but I think that's fantastic. And what I would also add to that is that we have, and this is something I'll echo with perhaps another question, we have a school district in which we have high expectations, yet they have responsibilities in so many different areas. So we have approximately 1,800 students, but we have one director of technology. So this is where an opportunity where I see the role of the community is so important, because we can support and help that process, ask the questions, support our district in terms of staying on top of these issues.
Just to piggyback that. It is very important. I didn't mean to minimize it, but I think it is the responsibility of everybody. It's the responsibility of all the staff. It's the responsibility of the community. And I guess I think of where I work and constantly looking at who has access to this data, who has access to children's data, who has access to social security numbers, and we find, I've worked in places where we've had issues and we've had to make adjustments. So it's that constant follow-up, and we have a policy, but it's relying on people. So there has to be that constant monitoring, I think, of what's happening, because you are relying on people to implement these policies. You can have the best policies, but you need the people to implement them.
Sorry, I would just like to add that we can look forward to the fact that BOCES right now is planning to put out a clear protocol. And I'd like to say that many of the protections that we can provide are built into the hardware. They're not about people using their discretion. They're about structural, objective rules that need to be followed in every school in New York State, to be quite honest. And if those are the ones that should be followed, they absolutely must be followed in Irvington.
So we'll start this time with Ms. Cropper and Rivertowns. So these two questions I did take together, and I think do make sense. Be the judge. The first is Irvington High School implementing a new master schedule in 2019-2020. Please share your views about the possible models. The second is, and I think they're the same, so a new master schedule is at the high school and it will be implemented in the 2019-2020 school year. This change has potential to dramatically change the educational experience for the high school students and teachers. What role in this process should the Board of Education have in making a decision on the model which is chosen? And do you think that community members should have a voice in the models being considered?
Well, this is definitely a current event. Today, I was at lunch and I received an email from the principal of the high school telling us that Thursday's meeting on this specific topic that we had demanded for middle school parents and students or anyone in the community to come to has been changed. We don't know when that meeting will be. That was supposed to be on the 10th. I have watched the presentations on video on the website, but speaking again about communication in our schools, I know that Michael was very integral to creating a lot of information about how people can use the PAC process, which is a way that the school board becomes aware of issues that are important to any member of the school community and puts it on the record. This specific issue, which goes to certain types of scheduling planning, there's one called block and one called drop. I do not have, 90 seconds is not enough time to discuss the difference between block and drop programming. I will invite everyone to go on the district website, look at the high school presentation, but I also promise you, as 6th grade parent representative, I have confirmed they will reschedule the middle school presentation because our children in middle school who are moving up to high school, the parents need to be educated. I think the board has tried to do their role of educating the parents. Unfortunately, at this point, we need some more education for the community. There is a survey that takes parent feedback, and I believe student feedback. I have to ask for you to piggyback on that, on this issue, and I really hope that before the end of this academic year, we get all the information we deserve.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure which way I should go. So I was hoping to attend that meeting on May 10th, so it's
happy
good
to
for
tell
me to
you
know.
we don't have a new date.
Thank you. So I am learning about this and don't have all of the details to discuss or to share right now. But with that being said, I was really looking forward to garnering some information and to really understanding what was changing. I think there's this delicate balance, right, between the board and the administration. The board has oversight, the district is managing the day-to-day operations. So it's our responsibility to understand the details of it and to make sure that it's really good for our students and that it's got positive outcomes. But I can't speak to it really very specifically right now, but maybe in the future I can. And I would definitely, if I was on the board, really dig deep into what was happening, because although my child is not in middle school, he will ultimately be in high school and be affected by this. So I have a vested interest in understanding what happens at the high school as well.
This is going to be a very exciting opportunity for all of us to think about what our culture is at the high school level. And for those who've been able to attend the parent information sessions, I think they were very informative and very exciting to reflect on because, again, it's so funny, the terms that we talk about sound so dull, but really what they support are dramatic experiences. And so for the master schedule, I believe the intent is very good, that there's that we have a self-induced pressure with the number of classes we have, and that creates a lot of homework, and that creates a pressure that we can solve by adjusting our schedule, and we can improve engagement by changing the schedule because we can have more club time. There's only about 20 or about 30 minutes of every couple of weeks for club time. And we can improve the ability for students to get assistance from their teachers in their learning. There is a big difference between block and drop, and the big difference is that block will require a significant shift in the practice of our faculty because it would expand the time classes take place from 42 minutes to about 77 minutes. I'm concerned because another focus of the board is the efficacy of our implementation of professional learning. It's very important, and with such a major decision, I'd ask very carefully how they would intend to achieve it if they're doing block. I tend personally to prefer the drop option.
So would you like to
start
again?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on that. I mean, basically, speaking to members of the community who have a better knowledge of this, the feeling is that the community has a stronger preference for drop, but there seems to be an articulation of a different preference for block from the district. And I hope that we can resolve this because the schedule as the children get older becomes so much more complex. You want to have flexibility, but you want to have rigor, and you want to make sure that the children also have some time to decompress and work on their, I'm sorry, I'm being told to stop. I will stop.
Up to another little bit of that, because your reference to feedback loop, I think, is so important in this question. I really admire the work of the committee, which has featured our high school administrators and department heads of our different areas of the school. And they really have spent a lot of time. They visited other schools with these schedules. But ultimately, in an earlier phase, they did get feedback from students. They did get the input from parents. But it's evolved, and I think they need to do another round in terms of making sure that they hear from students and parents in this process.
Okay, so this question this time will start with Ms. Bernstein and then Mr. Hanna and then Ms. Butler. What do you understand? What do you understand to be the greatest challenges confronting special needs students in Irvington schools, and what will you do to address those challenges?
That's a great question. I might need a minute to think about this.
Could you ask the question again?
Thank
Okay.
you. All right, thanks.
What do you understand to be the greatest challenges confronting special needs students in Irvington schools, and what will you do to address those challenges?
I think, as I think about the elementary school and the model that's in place, it's balancing the children's needs with the finances that we have available. And I feel like there's this real tug of war between the amount of funding that we can get that the children really need in order to succeed. And I have to admit, I'm not afraid to say I don't know. So I think that that's important because I've been involved in this now for the last few weeks. And I have some research to do on all of these details. And as they're presented, I would definitely do my homework. So I just wanted, if I'm not speaking as detailed maybe as some of the others are, that's sort of my new foray into this. But I think a lot of it from what I see, and after attending a lot of the board meetings, it's about the funding, right? I see this really push-pull between we need more special education teachers or we need more funding for this, and analyzing how many students we have in the district that have special needs and how much we're spending per student on those programs. So I see a lot of that as really the biggest challenge. I think if there was an infinite amount of money, I don't think that we would have as much discussion around it because I think we'd be putting forth the best programs we could without having to worry about the financial constraints of it. So. Sorry.
As we have with all our students, we have an ethical, legal responsibility to serve our students. It's the mission of the board and the district to serve each student in our district. And we have, you can't just simply have a brush-all statement when it comes to special needs. There are different needs and there's different levels of response. One key initiative within our district is to have a better assessment in terms of creating a baseline of our youngest students. There's a feeling that with intervention at an earlier age, we can provide supports in a timely manner, hopefully reduce the compounding of some needs that might have been more difficult to deal with if they were caught at a later time. I think there's also philosophy and a desire to have inclusion, that students are able to participate in classes with fellow students, to be part of our community, which they are. This is, again, way beyond a 90-second topic, but we have spent time looking at how we serve students. We have new leadership in our our PPS department. So I'm looking forward to hearing from them about the work that they've done this year.
You know, and I'm heartened to hear Mr. Hanna confirm the fact that we have an ethical and legal and a human duty to serve our special needs students to the best of our ability. I do think that one of the challenges we face, which isn't a challenge regarding how we're going to educate the students, has to do with how the state sometimes will throw at us a sudden cost shift and tell us that we're required to pay for a larger percentage of that educational piece. And that actually came up recently, and luckily with advocacy in Albany from all the Westchester districts plus districts across the state, we were able to change that attempted cost shift. I do think that this district, having had a child who was receiving special needs education via 504 for many of his years here, he's now at NYU, there's been a very creative and fiscally responsible approach towards serving the individual needs of all of our individual students, whether they're special needs students or what we call a mainstream student. I've also seen a very positive acceptance of inclusion throughout our entire community that wasn't as present when I moved here 14 years ago, and I'm really happy to see how that has come about in my experience of grades K through 12. It's been a really important and heartening experience.
Would everybody like to address this question then?
I just love sharing information, but
It's really hard. This is one of the big ones.
Yeah. But a great point about the funding piece. I mean, you brought it up as well. The state tried to shift it in the proposed budget. It would have cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I think it was like 800.
And so that's one of our responsibilities as well, is to keep an eye on what's happening in Albany, because they would like to throw everything at us if they could.
Next year we have a round table.
Yeah. Have everybody involved.
We'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, and we bring in the audience and we all sit around and have a productive conversation.
Okay, so Ms. Crawford, we'll start with this question, correct?
Is it a tape?
It does have tape. I know, and now I'm nervous every time I have tape. But that last one worked.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll see. My children did walk in as I was doing that, so I'm going to okay, so this question is, the first one is short, it goes along with the second, I think. So what limits are there on public school financing that differ from those for private or independent school financing? And then the management, financial, and otherwise of a for-profit school differs vastly from that of public schools such as Irvington. In Irvington, a school board must grapple with state regulations, unions, etc. How does your background, professional and or volunteer experience inform your potential work in our public schools? It's long.
Yeah, that's a two-parter, right? Maybe a 3 or 4-parter. Okay, let's go for it. So, I have only worked within public budgets for my entire career. One of the biggest differences is that you're basically working on a year budget. You get your funding from the state. You get an idea of what's coming in January. By February, they're fighting about it. By March, it's approved. Then you and your organization, whether it's a nonprofit or a governmental or a school district, you start working on it. And then by May, you have your vote. And then, of course, you don't get the money until October, even though your fiscal year starts in July. But this is all sort of the nitty-gritty and the granular stuff. You need to budget in a way that doesn't have the kind of reserves that a private institution would have. So, for example, you have a 4% operating expense budget limit. And sometimes people say, well, why don't we have bigger reserves? Well, you can't, because New York State controller will not allow you to have those reserves. It's always a yearly, new, and exciting battle, trying to find creative ways to work within a state mandated budget. I've done it in my profession. I found ways to save money at the end of the fiscal year and actually turn it over into the next fiscal year, which any of you who work at nonprofits know how hard that is to do, because usually if you don't use it, you lose it. And I believe that my background in creative budgeting under fiscal constraints brought by the state will be of great value to me on the board. Thank you.
So I have worked for both for-profit and nonprofit schools. I currently work at a nonprofit independent school. And the confines of a budget, while yes, the funding is different and it is much more finite with the public school environment. When I worked at the Educational Management Organization, we were a for-profit company. We managed public schools. So we had this really interesting business model where all we got was all the money that the state was providing to us, and we had to manage within those budgets. So although I was at a for-profit company, I was managing all these nonprofit budgets. And from a financial perspective, it's interesting because I do feel like I get that question a lot. Well, it's different if it's for-profit, it's different if it's nonprofit. You're still given a budget at the beginning of the year that you're expected to fall within. And there aren't, just because it's for-profit doesn't mean that there's all this abundance of additional reserves or additional ways to generate revenue. So I think you constantly have your departments and your schools working within the confines of their spending limits and trying to find creative ways to solve unanticipated challenges that come up. And I get them every week. Erin, can you find money for this? Can you find money for that? And we're constantly trying to move money around within the confines of our budget, even though it's not necessarily coming from a state funding source or it's because we're selling widgets or whatever it might be, but we're always trying to move money around within the confines of the budgets that we have and find ways to save and more effectively spend the resources that we've been given. So that's fine.
I can't really speak to private school funding. I work personally both for small companies, my own either boutique or bootstrap operations, however you'd like to reference it. And I've also worked at large corporations, recently at CNN and ABC News, but those aren't schools. So I spent my second job is as a school board member here with the Irvington School Board. I'm also a trustee on the Westchester Putnam School Board Association, which gives our school district and those of both counties representation of voice, a regional voice, particularly Albany. So one of the things that I'm looking for, so I'm diverting this slightly, is that each year, similar to what we were saying about special education funding, we're seeing attempts to divert tax money towards private school use versus coming back to our public schools. And so that's something that I've been very involved and attentive to making sure it doesn't occur. But it's a chip away process, and that ultimately means more transfer to local taxpayers.
Yes. Yeah, I just would like to build upon. Yes?
Who would go first to piggyback? Is it me to step out of time? Out of time? No. Oh, it is my turn? Okay. Yeah, I just sort of want to compare that because when we talk about the difference between independent, not-for-profit schools like types that we have, in New York City, we're talking about endowments that have millions and millions of dollars, and we're also talking about the ability to make contributions. So I just want to say, the constraints that face a public school district, yes, we work within a budget wherever you work, but the changes, the tax cap that changes every year, and our limits, I think it's a very different bowl of fish.
Ms. Bernstein, do you want to say anything? Okay. All right, so Ms. Bernstein will be the first for this question, and I feel I'll be happy. This is a very short question. So, Rod, what is your vision for education in this community?
I want to see us have the best school district that we can possibly, I wanted us to have the best school district that we can possibly have. I want our kids to feel enriched, to be exposed to as many programs as possible within the funding constraints that we have, to feel challenged and to be happy. And I think there's, academic rigor is so important, but we also want to make sure that our kids are happy and enjoying coming to school and enjoying learning. And I hope that we can develop a district where all of our kids can find their passion. I know our focus has been a lot on STEM. I said I really think it should expand to STEAM. There are so many jobs out there that are pivotal, that depend upon creativity. We all might be coding, but we need someone to come up with a concept with the graphic design or whatever it might be. And I think just having a really well-rounded offering for our students, I think is so important in today's day and age. And I think it's so important for the kids. I think K through 12 is where you get to explore and experience and find that passion within you in order to succeed.
I would echo some of what you said. I'm completing one term. Honestly, if it was, for example, just about my kids, I feel like they're set. They have received an excellent education. They will do very well. What is the motivation? The motivation is that we have an opportunity in this community to truly continue to be exceptional. To go from being one of the top schools in the country to being even better than that in terms of exactly the instruction the students receive, their engagement with it, is a real challenge, and it's one that is a motivator in terms of being involved on this school board.
And I have to say, even though this is my first answer, I want to piggyback off the two other people here. When I hear the word happiness, and I hear the word creativity, and I hear the word, yeah, my kid is set, but I want to make sure that what comes behind my child continues to build upon that excellence in this school district. I want to see that. I mean, that is what the passion is about public education. It doesn't end with your child and your family. It is about the entire community. It's about our love for this community. It's about our respect for our schools and wanting to see that reflected beyond here. And I think that we really have the ability to provide that and the potential to accomplish it.
So this question will start with Mr. Hannah. This is a staged question, but what is your education background and experience in education specifically? And then please describe your experience in working and volunteering in public schools and public education.
Yes, okay.
So it's work and volunteering.
My work in education, it feels like a job, but I don't have a job, no one pays me. It's a glorious volunteer role and roles that I've had. But I have a secret opportunity I've had over a couple decades, which is I am married to a phenomenal elementary school teacher who teaches in the nearby district. And so long before I ever got involved directly with helping pass the budget, being involved with the PTSA, being involved with any number of opportunities to serve our schools, I've got to watch her work, to learn from the many friends that we have who are involved in education. And I think at the end of the day, that I didn't know it at the time was helping inform my understanding of public school education. And then I became involved around 2012 in helping pass a budget at a very critical time following recession and the introduction of the tax cap. And that was the start of a very sharp learning curve. And then since then, it's only accelerated being on the school board.
Thank you. Well, specifically in terms of experience, I was a teaching assistant when I was in grad school. I was a teaching assistant for communications law. Later on, as a prosecutor, I was involved with a program where I went to public schools throughout Brooklyn, teaching children about criminal justice. But I think the biggest experience you have as a teacher is being a parent in a high-quality school district that provides the parents with the ability to have, they feel like they have a partnership with the schools, with the teachers, a level of involvement, and then you get to really experience the schools through that feedback loop to a certain extent. But then, more professionally than that, I'm not talking about at work, because I run trainings, but those are for adults. Here, my volunteer experience, learning as much as I can about educational policy, involving curriculum, and involving policies in our schools, would be something that I've been engaged in, I guess, for the last 14 years in Irvington. And I've really appreciated the opportunity that the PTSA, the University Foundation, and our village organizations have provided for me to do that.
So I kind of said this already, but I've spent 15 of over 25 years of my professional career working in education, both for nonprofit, for-profit, higher ed, and most recently a year in an independent school. I'd say the highlight of my experience in education was, and I'm going to say I volunteered to teach when I worked at the college. I got an opportunity to teach, I was asked to teach an accounting class mid-semester, and right, we're all sitting here thinking, well, she must have just been teaching accounting 101. No, I got asked to teach forensic accounting, and that was not my background or my wheelhouse. And I went in to teach kids, international students from an urban area, that really thrived hearing my experience and what I was able to bring to the table. And it was the most dynamic experience out of anything I've done. I've worked in finances, I push the paper around, I can manage budgets, I can analyze data, quick, give me a test, I can add numbers really quickly. But teaching was really, it was the most fulfilling. And I will say I volunteered. I did not get paid an extra stipend to do it. I had to fit it in within my 12-hour workday that I was already working, and had to quick study on forensic accounting, and I was able to teach the kids, and they learned, and it was a really successful, fulfilling accomplishment that I'm probably the most proud of. It'll probably be what I do when I retire. Sorry, that was personal.
It's okay. Okay, does anyone want to move on to the next question? Sure. Okay. For this, we start with Ms. Popper. How can the board best assess the conditions on our school buses to minimize overcrowding and ensure an appropriate behavioral environment?
Sorry, just repeat it one more time.
Sure. How can the board best assess the conditions on our school buses to minimize overcrowding and ensure an appropriate behavioral environment?
I thought I heard that correctly. So when you ask how the board can assess that asks a very clear question. So going back, not to beat this to death, but there is a process called the Parent Advisory Council process. It's a PAC process. If you are aware, you have cameras on buses, at least that's my belief. I would need to have them. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. So you know that there will be a recording. My child's able to walk to school, so please bear with me on that lack of information. The recordings exist, but if you don't say something, nobody can do anything. And if you don't bring a complaint to PAC, it's not necessarily going to get up to the board. You can put in a PAC complaint anonymously to your grade representative, to your VP of your school. It will be brought up. I see other PAC representatives in the audience. It will be brought up to the administrators in the building at your school. It will be memorialized in minutes. It will be responded to by the administration. It will go to the board and they will be able to see it. As an immediate safety factor, if something has happened to your child, you must call the school immediately and they will deal with it. That's another aspect of it. But if you're talking about the specific question about the board, that is the process that is most apt to fulfill the needs of parents in the community with these concerns.
So I'll just echo what Beth said. The PAC is an amazing resource that I don't think everyone in the community is aware of, and it works. So bringing things up to your PAC representative within the school is probably the most effective and efficient way to clearly communicate your issues. It is anonymous, as Beth has said, and it's effective. So, and again, if there's something really urgent, you can call the principal.
I'm so excited because I've been such a huge advocate this year of using the Parent Advisory Council, and we've had a chance to talk, and I'm glad to hear you say that it is an effective process, because I think there in the past has been this idea that I'm unhappy about something, I'm going to go to the board. And that can be an exercise in frustration, because we really are looking at things from a 10,000th level a lot of times. But if you go through the Parent Advisory Council, they're in front of that principal every month. And that principal has to be accountable to the degree that they respond. They may not give you the answer you want, but they're going to give you an answer, and there's going to be minutes, and that's something that you can point to if eventually you do go to the board. But ultimately, I'd like to think that our administrators are very responsive. There are cameras in the buses, and I do know of certain instances that have occurred, and there is follow-up. and then I think that's the case in all situations.
And I just want to piggyback on the safety issue. So one thing we all have to realize, and this came up after Parkland, when we had a very well-attended school board meeting. Often I go to school board meetings and Aaron and I, Michael's up on the dais, Aaron and I are in the audience, maybe there are two other people. Okay. But aside from that, after that we had a very, very crowded meeting about safety issues. And if there are safety issues, it's extremely important that you report them immediately. But again, to keep talking about the PAC process, I think everyone at this table has been able to observe, and many of you in the audience, that if you utilize the PAC process, and I can't emphasize this enough, to talk about how the community can get their needs known directly to the board, it absolutely works.
So, Ms. Bernstein will be the what do you think about a spending freeze?
It's a great question. Spending freeze, it always sounds so harsh. I think about effectively spending our resources. And what does that mean within the confines of our budget? It's all about effectively spending our resources. It's not about saying a spending freeze, I'm going to curtail spending, I'm going to add spending. I don't think there's one way of just looking at something. Like, it's about the money that we have and how are we effectively and efficiently allocating our resources. I don't think I could fairly say, yes, I support a spending freeze. I don't think that would make really any sense in the context of this environment. I think what I support is effectively and efficiently spending our money to be sure that we get the outcomes and the results that we're anticipating for the dollars that we're spending. So.
Living in this tax cap environment has been a dramatic shift, and we are constantly balancing between whatever the cap comes in at based on CPI and some other factors, and what our expenses are. An example would be at the initial, at the beginning of the tax cap, that we're coming out of a recession in which we'd seen cuts to programs and staff, and then on top of that, we had a cap that limited what we could do on spending. So in an effort to recover, they were essentially handcuffed, and the community came out, and that was the difference between us continuing to have a decline in terms of what we could offer to students, and what we've done, which is be able to restore programs, restore staff. And I think that we have been fiscally responsible. Our tax rate increases over the last 3 years have been below 1.5%. We are focused on controlling costs. There are pieces that we don't control, such as mandates, and there's large factors such as the teacher retirement service and others that we contribute to, that there's mandates from the state. So we have to make sure that we are staying between those two rails of not having to, again, go over the cap and not have to cut programs. So a spending freeze is not a practical option, but a strategic vision in terms of how we approach our spending is, and I think we're doing that.
I don't see the concept of spending freeze as at all practical for our schools in their current situation. We work very well within the tax cap that has been put on us by the state government. It is a vacillating number, but it generally allows us to work within inflation. Inflation continues to go up. In addition, as we talked about, when the state is changing the rules on a yearly basis, sometimes they give less to our pension contributions, sometimes they give more. If you start talking about spending increases, particularly in the current environment where we, I think, have a community mandate that we want to improve security, which is going to have packaged in costs, you're not going to be able to have a spending freeze and be able to do that and not severely impact instruction and quality of instruction and all the other things that you need to do to even maintain the level of excellence we have now. You would have to cut and you would have to lower the quality of what you're providing.
everyone of this question answered. Actually, okay, so this is, candidates have talked about safe and secure schools. What does each candidate think that means specifically, and does this include guns in the school? And this same question, basically, but what do you think is the status of safety in our schools? What do you think needs to be done in our schools to keep our kids safe? And where do you stand on school employees being armed?
I'll start with the end. That's an easy one for me. I don't believe that school employees, particularly our educators and immediate staff, should be armed. I am pleased with the relationship and the support that our Irvington Police Department has provided, and I hope that we will continue. I certainly want to see that relationship continue in terms of their presence on our campus. We are a small community. We do know our police officers. They provide excellent service, and that's in terms of the armed presence what I think would be the best option for us. In terms of our safety, there's on several levels. Before Parkland, which really upset people across the country, we were already working on improvements, encourage us to look that much more sharply and urgently at some improvements that we've made already in terms of better efforts to secure our classroom doors and add a security guard. Our budget, proposed budget, which personally I would ask you to support on May 15th, includes $125,000 of spending, and then we are anticipating proposing a tax-neutral bond in the fall, which would also include additional safety measures as part of that.
Yeah, and in addition to the measures that were just discussed, we're expecting, I mean, not we personally here, but we as a community are expecting some developments federally in terms of additional funding that may be available from the federal and the state governments. Of course, we have to wait and see. But that being said, in the well-attended school board meeting that I think almost everyone in this room was at after Parkland when we came back from February recess, I think it was clearly stated that the board and the district leadership team and law enforcement and the community have been working very hard on this issue, not just after February break in Parkland, but for years going back. And that many of these issues, and this is something I spoke about publicly on that night, they need to remain confidential because you cannot have safety if you're revealing all the details of your safety plan. And that's something you need to have with your board members. Your board members need to maintain confidentiality about safety plans. But I do feel positive that as we move forward, possibly over the summer, in addition to the bond, which I really look forward to learning the details of, that we're going to be having good news from the federal and state government about their doing their fair share to keep our students, our staff, our buildings safe.
Can you just repeat the whole question again? Because there were many facets.
Okay, so there are so candidates have talked about safe and secure schools. What does each candidate think that means specifically? Does this include guns in the schools? What do you think is the status of safety in our schools? What do you think needs to be done in our schools to keep our kids safe? And where do you stand on school employees being armed?
So I too will come out and answer the last part of the question quickly and assertively. I too do not support guns in schools for our administrators or our faculty. I don't think that that's the solution. And when I think about the safety and security of our schools, I reflect back on when our middle school and high school campus was built. It was built during a time when schools were part of the community, so they were meant to be very welcoming. They were meant to allow people to have easy access to the facilities for families, for community members to kind of come in and out. That model doesn't work today, unfortunately, as we've seen in so many places, from Newtown to Parkland. And I think what it means is having a very safe, confidential plan in place that all of the teachers and the faculty understand, that it's consistent. I think the parents also need to understand what some of the protocols are. I remember that board meeting where the room was packed and just there were some concerns about what was acceptable protocol for the students in terms of how they could communicate outwardly to the families And so what are the protocols, what access do parents have, and understanding that during, a time if there was ever a situation that, where there was a lockdown or something, which we did have actually. But just keeping our kids safe, I think, and our faculty and our administration is the number one priority. Would you like?
Yeah, no, there's that.
Okay.
So, in terms of those who'd like to continue to follow the development of the proposed bond, there is a stakeholder committee that is beginning to meet, and so there's the opportunity to, I believe, reach out to the Buildings and Grounds Committee to maybe share ideas, and that they will then be reporting out in the near future to a board meeting. We also have a company coming soon, a new company to do a security audit, so a fresh set of eyes. So that's something that we're doing. And then I want to expand, I am going to say this, I want to expand the idea to the emotional well-being of our students. We have added psychologists, social workers, guidance counselors, and we want a culture in which our students feel like they have someone that they can talk to and are supported by. So.
That's a good Ms. Crawford, did you want to?
Yeah, I did want to also, because it was such a multifaceted question on so many levels. I too am against this idea of arming our administrators and our teachers. I want that to be extremely clear. I don't want it to seem that I'm somehow consenting to that. But in addition, I feel that the psychological piece is very important. Our children, my child grew up starting in kindergarten with having those shelter in place drills in the cubbies in their kindergarten rooms. And I think it's so important that we do our best to not only make our campuses safe, but continue to help our children to feel that safety inside of themselves. And we as parents must feel safe bringing and leaving our children at school, and those processes will be improved.
I will just add one thing. And forgive me, I'm going to indulge a personal situation, but my goddaughter was in Newtown in first grade in 2012. So this is a very personal plight for me in terms of ensuring safety and security of our students. It doesn't just impact the families that are very specifically affected, it affects the whole community. So when we talk about social and emotional well-being of the students, and it's everybody, if God forbid there's a situation, it's everybody that gets affected, and it's a community that is still healing, and it's just so important. And also,
Okay, so Ms. Crawford, you'll be the first person for this question. Please describe what a successful Board of Education means to you.
Oh, here we go. A successful Board of Education is, in Irvington, in the context of Irvington, with our 7 members, which we've had since July of 2018, is a group of 7 people who work together as an effective team, looking after the priorities of the entire community, taking into account the needs of the entire community. And I can't say this enough, although many of the people here are current K through 12 parents, it also includes retirees, it includes business owners, it includes empty nesters, it includes people who have yet to have children or may not have children who live in our community. It includes our preschool parents. It includes our voting students, those that we registered this year. And in doing that, it's a hard job, but the goal is to treat the best interests of the community with your highest fiduciary and professional standards under the rules of governance for school boards. They're complicated. Again, it's not a 90-second answer. We could all go to a 6-hour seminar tomorrow on the topic. And if anyone wants to join me, I will arrange for us to all go to a webinar on that topic.
That said very well. I think it's about a group of people that are representing the community, and I think it's so hard to be able to put sometimes maybe your personal beliefs or situations as the priority. So it's really about the 7 people working together to represent the community that's voted for them, right? That's brought them in, that said, please represent me. I agree with your positions. And it's about being able to respectfully disagree, I think, at times, and to be able to communicate effectively and to appreciate one another's independence and thoughts and insights that they can bring to the table, and to do what's best, and to do what's best, ultimately in the schools for the kids.
There is no special power you receive if you're elected to the school board. I will echo what you said, which it's really, another way to phrase it is it's about the relationships, your relationships with the community, your relationship with the one employee of the school board, which is the superintendent, and your relationship with how are you serving students and understanding what decisions you make, what guidance you provide, what priorities that you align with the administration in making will benefit students. I think within the board and in our relationship with the district administration, it's about having a healthy dialogue. Talk to any of the school board members or prospective school board members. They are strong personalities. No one here is a pushover, and they have some really deeply held beliefs there, but they're also constantly learning. They respond to new information, and so sometimes out in a letter to the editor or something, you'll see something about a rubber stamp board. That is not the case. This current board I'm so proud of. We have some really heartfelt, thoughtful conversations. We don't agree all along the way until we have to make a decision. And then we know that we have to move forward. And I'm very proud of the board that we've had this year. And I look forward to that continued success in terms of working together.
Okay, I get to piggyback first. So what I'd like to say is I did speak to a member of the community today who made one of those rubber stamp comments. And I was able to say to her very clearly, in addition to program assessment, which I think we all talked about earlier this evening, it is also the role of the board to assess the performance of the district leadership team. And in fact, our local, association of school board members, that is their main seminar topic for this term. And I know for a fact that members of the school board have attended it. It is how to assess the district leadership team. And I would like to say that they do that in good faith, and it's a difficult job. Any of us who work at other organizations know when you're on a board, it's very difficult to assess people who are your CEO, your CFO, your CTO, but it's part of the duty of the board, and I think the board does it well, and I think that we will continue to do that in board work moving forward.
And to piggyback off that, it's also about the board then setting those goals, and through transparency, sharing those goals of the board with the community, so that then they can be assessed, even by the community. If we set a goal to do X, Y, and Z, the community can see what's happening. The meetings are, as Beth and I learned, the meetings held in public. And the community can see, are we meeting those objectives that we've set for ourselves as a board?
Yeah, just one final thought. Just keep coming back to your excellent comment earlier about feedback loop. And I think this board has really sought to improve its communication about the work that it's doing. That you don't have to be amazing like these two and show up and actually sit through the meetings. You can find out about it in all kinds of ways. But additionally, we are trying to implement opportunities by talking about the Parent Advisory Council, by putting out the district survey, and by encouraging, like we were talking about with the high school master schedule, that the administration continues to seek input of students and community members and processes like that.
So this has a chance, most likely will be our last question actually, and then after this we'll move to closing statements. So we start with Ms. Bernstein, and the question is, what is the most important issue facing our district at this time?
Actually, I think there are two issues. I think it is fiscal responsibility and sustainability. We do have a 2% tax cap. I think understanding how we can more efficiently allocate our resources, understanding the details that are in our budgets and our spending. And I also think in today's day and age, I think it's safety and security, and ensuring that all of our students feel safe and secure and feel like they can go to school every day without feeling any threats to their safety. I'm going to keep it simple.
There are no two things. We have a balance that we have to maintain, and it's a difficult task, and we have to keep our eyes on a lot of different balls at the same time. And so it's about continuously improving instruction, making sure our students feel supported, and making sure that we have reserves for the challenges that we face. All of those fall within also making sure that we, as you said, have a sustainable model. I think we've done a great job in terms of expanding program and restoring the number of teachers we have back to levels before the recession. But that's an area where, we talked about publicly at board meetings. We will likely we are slowing down in terms of hiring. This year has 0 teachers and staff hired, and I think that'll be the case going forward. We've maintained healthy reserves, and so the biggest job we have is to continue improving our schools with the limitations of the tax cap environment that we're in.
Yeah, and again, we have to piggyback on each other because quite honestly, that's what it's about. It's about providing educational excellence within fiscal constraints that we have no control over except creatively within them. And when we talk about a 2% cap, I remind everyone in this room that just a year ago, we were struck with a negative cap. That was a cap which, when you looked at the way that the formula was utilized, was requiring us to work within a negative number. Of course, it was a fractional negative number, but this wasn't only happening to Irvington, it happened to other counties and school districts throughout the state. That is the most important issue facing the district. I do think that in addition to all the fine comments made by the other people at this table, it may be time to look at ideas for how to share resources. We already do that a little bit in the village. I was sort of amazed to hear at a meeting where we were talking about a recycling program that had been used in Scarsdale, that, for example, we have cost sharing that's created by us using DPW at our schools. It seems like a little, but it's an example of something on the budget that you wouldn't ordinarily see. And what I would hope to see as municipal governments are now being pushed towards having resource sharing by the state, that we maybe get ahead of that game and see how we can find that kind of resource sharing, perhaps in other Rivertown communities, schools, other local districts, perhaps elsewhere in Greenberg or along the Rivertowns, where I think we feel a little more like we're sister schools or brother schools.
Does anybody want another level?
Yes. Just, you triggered a couple of things
Yeah.
for me, so I just want to add. When it comes to the tax cap, which is, our real estate tax values are so important right now, and we're watching them rise and rise and rise, and we saw them rise and rise and rise from 04 to 09, and suddenly there was a crash. And I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we're in a position, should there be another decline in real estate values, that our budgets are prepared to absorb those types of changes, because it could very well happen. So, oh shoot.
Well, you do have a closing statement.
Thanks. We may have to change it in the future from rebuttal to piggyback or something. I think what you said about shared services is a great idea, great thing to remind us about. We do have BOCEs, which is essentially shared services. We've restarted meeting with our local school boards in the Rivertowns, which in the past has provided our shared transportation service and a relationship with Hastings with special education, and we can look at other opportunities there. I'm also a member of the Westchester Public School Board Association, and absolutely we don't have to figure it out all ourselves. We can learn from similar districts and share those ideas.
Yeah, I think I got the last piggyback. I'm so excited. I do want to say, building upon what the other people at the table were saying, is that in addition to this, when we talk about that kind of cushion we need to have, I think that one of the cushions is ensuring excellence in our schools ensures the value of our investments in the community. It becomes another one of these feedback loops, whereby working hard to make sure that the value of our schools is seen by others in the community, so they move here and they maintain our real estate values, will enable us to maintain our fiscal security and the excellence of our schools.
Perfect. Okay, well, we will move to closing statements now. I apologize to the community members whose questions were not able to be asked, but we can ask them another time. And we will start in the reverse order. So Ms. Crawford, you get to go first. 2 minutes for the closing statements.
I don't know that I'll use the entire 2 minutes after being limited to 90 minutes plus piggyback, but I'll try my best. What I'd like to say is I really want to speak to the community here, or the community that's watching this on video, to say that I have such a passion for public school education, but specifically for our Irvington schools. I think it's been proven in my volunteer experiences here, but in addition that my work experiences as an attorney and as a public manager who has worked creatively within government and nonprofit organizations for almost 3 decades now, I really feel that I can provide such value to you on the school board, and I really hope that I will have your support on May 15th. But I did promise myself that before I ended my closing statement, I would thank my husband, David Rubin, who's in the audience, because quite honestly, being the spouse of an attorney who decides to go into public interest law can be slightly disappointing financially. And then having to add on to that a very involved volunteer life can also be a little disappointing in terms of when dinner gets put on the table. And then to add that, the election. And I cannot thank you and the children, Matthew and Ava, for supporting me through this campaign.
I too feel like I've dedicated a good portion of my life to education. It hasn't always been in the public sector, but the majority of it actually has been in the public sector, and it's also really been helping kids in urban areas that don't have access to the same opportunities I think that we're all lucky to have access to. With that being said, I do want to piggyback the shared services comment. When we were exploring foreign language recently, we had a discussion with Joyce about how we could possibly have clubs that are shared amongst other districts, whether it's the Rivertown districts or Scarsdale or things like that. And we were really trying to think about the most creative way to allow foreign language into our schools without it costing extra money to the district. And that was really important to us. With that being said, I think the most important asset that I have to the board is my financial experience. I believe that it's critical to have somebody on the board who understands finances, who's managed budgets, who understands constraints, who's creatively solved financial solutions. And I hope that you vote for me on May 15th. And I did thank my husband at the beginning of this, who's been a rock throughout this when I've maybe not been quite the rock. So let's pretend last night didn't exist and I'll move on. But you've been awesome, and the things that you've written have just really made me feel so special. And also to all the people that have come out to support me. I had no idea how much love in the community there was, and we are so lucky to be surrounded by such awesome, supportive people. And no matter what happens, I want everyone to go out and vote on May 15th. I hope it's for me. If it's not, we have 3 awesome candidates on this panel, and I thank them for the opportunity to be able to sit up here with them. And I've learned so much from both of you. So thank you.
Similarly, I don't know how it was for you, but I really enjoyed it. The opportunity to talk with you, and you know, we should have more opportunities. Not everyone else has to come.
Yes,
yes, but you're welcome.
Transparency.
I also have to thank my wife Beth, who's there in the back, and my 2 daughters. I'm finishing my first term. Before moving forward with the idea of running again, we did talk about it. It's not, it does take a lot of time. There's no getting around that. And I appreciate their understanding and their support. And now that they're on Facebook, little likes are appreciated for my children, because I don't necessarily always get those. So that's great. But you know, I love them so much, and I'm so appreciative. My mom is here. Amazing. She was out there helping today spread the word, so fantastic. And if I haven't worked with you before, I look forward to working with you soon, because this is an incredible community. In terms of the voter turnout, we should be really proud of ourselves. There are much larger communities near us who have fewer voter turnout on election day. Last year, There was 78% approval for the budget. I'd like you to beat that number this year because it's a good budget and because you care about our schools and because it's a sign of your confidence in moving forward together. And if you have ideas about things that should change, be involved. I wrote a letter in the district newsletter for the winter about dozens of ways that you can be engaged. I know you in this room already are, and if you're watching, I'm sure many of you are as well, but we want you to be a part of this and our district success. So thank you.
Please do go vote on May 15th. PTSA did vote to support the budget, so please vote yes on the budget. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Today was